Hey, Life Uncloseted family, closet busters, and bold move makers. It's me, Rick Clemens, your host on Life Uncloseted. And I want to just step forward one step from the podcast just a couple of days ago with Jeff Goins, because it was so powerful. And I found it intriguing that it really ties so much to this month's theme of being an obliger. And what I find fascinating about people who oblige, because I am one of them, is that sometimes we even oblige our own thinking so much that it does damage. And if you go back and take a listen to that one, if you haven't listened to it, which I would encourage you to go check out the one just previous to this podcast, what I find was so powerful about what Jeff talked about was in those moments when he finally began to really understand himself. And it's episode 364, that part of what he had to do was he had to quit obliging his own thoughts. And as I listened to him, and then we had a conversation afterwards, I realized that the next advice I'm going to give you, there are three things that I find really helpful when you're stuck in this obliging kind of hamster wheel of life. As he and I were speaking about it, I realized he actually did all these things to move himself forward. And I don't want to give a whole lot out about what happened in that podcast because I'd love for you to go back and listen to it. But what Jeff realized was he was obliging his own thoughts to his own detriment. And I've seen this happen in myself and in other people's as I work with clients. And so if you find yourself obliging yourself to your own thoughts, here's 3 steps I would encourage you to take. Number 1, give yourself permission to question those thoughts. The moment you oblige and buy into, well, this is what success means, even if you don't really feel it, or this is what I must do to be successful, or this is what I need to do to stay in this relationship, whatever it is, you're obliging a thought. And if it doesn't feel right, that's when you're in the obliger mode. The second thing I would suggest too is if that thought leads you to be looking outside yourself for validation, and Jeff talked a whole lot about this in the interview we just did, it probably means you're trying to oblige by doing something for someone else or in some situation to feel some form of validation. Now, that doesn't mean always don't do that. It just means take a look, truly look at, is this coming from a space of I'm needing something outside of myself to validate who I am instead of digging into myself to validate who I am? And I have struggled through this my own self. In fact, I realized just in the last couple of months, it was kind of a creepy crawly thing that was starting to grow back into my consciousness. And I took that creepy crawly thing and I just slapped the shit out of it and said, nah, you are not coming in. You are not getting back into my system. Because what I realized is every time I go looking outside of myself for the validation, I lose my confidence, I lose courage, I lose self-respect, and I become this over-obliger and I become overwhelmed. The third thing is, I want you, if you're feeling this way, like, okay, I'm doing all this stuff, and you're over-obligated, or you always find yourself doing everything for everybody else, but not yourself sometimes, ask yourself, how is what you're doing really serving you? And I know that's exactly what Jeff got to. In fact, we talked a little bit more about that after the podcast was over. And it was powerful to hear him say, I really had to ask myself these questions. How is this serving me? Is this really giving me what I really wanted? So if you're feeling over-obligated or like you're always obliging other people and you're not getting the things you want in life because you're spending too much time doing for others, which is not a bad thing. I want to make that clear. It's not a bad thing to do things for others, but if it's at cost to yourself, try practicing those 3 steps. Number 1, give yourself permission, big permission to say no and tell that thought to go away. Number 2, look at it from the perspective of, is this something that's causing me to seek validation outside myself? And number 3 is to ask yourself, how is this really serving me? Because I know for me, every time I get over-obligated or I'm constantly obliging others, I do not like myself whatsoever. So there you have it, 3 steps to really analyze, are you obliging for all the wrong reasons and how to turn it around. So thanks for listening. We've got a few more weeks of these rants and riffs to come, and I'm going to let you know specifically when I'm going to launch the new podcast and keep you up to date on that. And stay tuned for next week's episode 366 with Midge Noble. She's a friend of mine, and her and I are going to go dive into the lovely little cesspool of shame and see how we can uncloset ourselves from that nasty little viral infection that sometimes we find ourselves in, called shame. Take care, everyone, and never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into facing your fears, making your bold moves, and living life without apologies.